So in this video, I'm going to be mainly dealing with one of the surah from the Quran. That's Surah 20, passage 76. This passage, Surah 20, is known as the Taha, and that's because of mystical letters in verse 21, Taha, which nobody allegedly knows the meaning to. But Surah 20 mostly deals with like Moses the prophet from the Bible and stuff like that. But in addition to this Surah 20, I'm also going to be referencing in many ways, not directly but indirectly, Surah 90, verses 7 through 9, Surah 90, 7 through 9, where it talks about the nafs, the soul, specifically in Arabic in this passage, the wanafsin wama sawaha, the degrees of the soul, which in some traditions of Sufism are being interpreted as degrees of initiation, using the lata'if, all nafs, the subtleties of the soul, as kind of like the chakras of yoga for meditation, or in some versions of Kabbalah, such as in Chassidut, Hithbedut meditation, where we use the 10 Sephiroth as chakras in a sense as well, internal vortices of psychosexual energy used as an aid to achieve enlightenment through meditation. So I want to stress from the start that I am not an expert in Islamic studies or Arabic. I'm still a student. These are some of my notes on learning Arabic. So I do not claim to be able to pronounce the Arabic or have a knowledge of the Arabic like I do Hebrew or Judaic studies or biblical studies, which are my area of expertise. But I think this is a message that's important. So please forgive me if I mispronounce anything or misinterpret anything. So what I want to do tonight is promote Sufism, which is the mystical tradition of Islam, because I think that today Islam unfortunately has been influenced too much by Islamic traditionalism, i.e. Salafism, Islamic fundamentalism, i.e. Wahhabism, and Islamic radicalism, i.e. Qutbism. And I think it's important to understand that the mystical tradition of Sufism has existed probably since the very beginning of Islam, and is probably a more traditional aspect of Islam as a faith, and it is much more tolerant and much less violent. It doesn't promote a literal interpretation of jihad as violent warfare, but rather as an internal struggle within the soul of humankind, since jihad literally means struggle. It doesn't mean holy war or anything like that. It means struggle, and they interpret it metaphorically, symbolically, mystically as a battle within the soul for righteousness. So this is my copy of the Noble Qur'an. It was gifted to me by one of the imams of the Islamic Society of New Jersey in 2001. I'm going to be reading from Surah 2076 in this English translation, which has the English as well as the Arabic. So it has Aden, and then it has as an interpretation Eden, and then it has paradise, and then as an interpretation everlasting gardens, under which rivers flow, wherein they will abide forever. Such is the reward of those who purify themselves. And then as commentary it adds, by abstaining from all kinds of sins and evil deeds which Allah has forbidden, and by doing all that Allah has ordained. So the first part of this surah begins with Jannatu Adnin. Jannatu, gardens, plural, of Adnin, Eden or Eden, gardens of Eden. Okay, so the next part of this surah goes Tajri min taqtiha. So Tajri, flowing, min, from, taqtiha, beneath. Okay, so for the last half of this passage from the Surah 2076, it goes La'anharu kaladina fiha. So, li, for, anharu, rivers, kaladina, eternal, fiha, within. So here, before I move on to the second half of this passage, I just want to point out that I think the Sufis are interpreting this passage not just literally, but hyper-literally, kind of like the Zohar does with the Torah and the Kabbalah, where I think they're interpreting eternal rivers within as the Lataif al-Nafs, as the subtleties of the soul, which are kind of like the chakras of the yoga of Hinduism, basically psychosexual internal vortices of energy that are used in meditation to aid in enlightenment purposes. Okay, so moving on to the second half of this passage from the surah, it goes, Wajalika jazahu. So, wa and jalika, this is that, jazao, reward. Okay, and so we finally come to the end of this passage from Surah 2076, and it goes, Man tazaka. So, man, one, who is, tazaka, sanctified. And I put the colons because I think the reward in the previous part of the passage is referring to this one who is sanctified. That's the reward, in my opinion. Okay, before I move on, I just want to point out that the Sufis interpret this Arabic word, tazkiyah, sanctification, as basically being a synonym for Sufism itself, the mystical tradition of Islam. So whenever the Sufis find this word tazkiyah in the Qur'an or its variations, they interpret it as being references to the mystical tradition that today we refer to as Sufism. Here I have an image of the Lataif al-Nafs, the subtleties of the soul. There's different interpretations of there being 5 such subtleties, 6 such subtleties, and 7 such subtleties. In this image, I'm showing the 6 Lataif, but during my more recent studies, I think there might actually be 7. But anyways, this will give you an idea of how they're kind of like the chakras of yoga, or one interpretation of the Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Sufi tradition claims to go back to the very foundation of Islam with Muhammad, the Islamic prophet, blessed be his memory, and his companions, the As-Sahaba, also known as the Salafi. And the first of these companions of the prophet to be called a Sufi, allegedly, was Abd Allah ibn Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, also known as Abu Hashim. And I'm going to put an image of Muhammad the Prophet and his companions here. I'm doing it in full reverence. Their faces are shining and glowing, so there's no irreverence with images intended by me. So anyways, so I think it's really important today to stress that even the founder of modern Islamic fundamentalism, i.e. Wahhabism, Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, who was highly critical of the Islamic mystical tradition of Sufism, even he stated, and I'll quote, "We do not negate the way of the Sufis and the purification of the inner self," i.e. tazkiyah. So I think it's really important that we promote the peaceful, tolerant aspect of the faith of Islam known as Sufism today, especially amongst this radical, violent, extremist ideology of jihad, because that's the Jedi way. Shalom, peace. So one of the sources available today for Sufis, those interested in studying the mystical tradition of Islam, is this partial English translation of the Shams al-Ma'arif, the sun of knowledge, sun like the sun in the sky. This is an ancient Arabic grimoire, similar to the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon, the Clavicula Solomonis Regis, and the Lemegeton with the Goetia. So this ancient Arabic grimoire also allows you to use the secrets of the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, for instance, or allegedly allows you to summon one of the jinn, the genie, that King Solomon used, just kind of like how the Goetia allegedly allows you to summon the daimons that King Solomon allegedly summoned to build the temple in Jerusalem. So I want to mention that an excellent source for Islamic studies on YouTube is Mr. Philip Holm and his channel, Let's Talk Religion. So I highly recommend that channel.